and we hope that tomorrow...
Negotiator, diplomat, spokesman, intellectual, instigator, rabble-rouser, political pawn, propagandist. These are all terms used to describe the late chief Palestinian negotiator, Dr. Saeb Erekat, reflecting a mixed legacy. But above all, he was an urbane, articulate, and passionate advocate for the Palestinian cause, a regular feature on television screens around the world as he argued the Palestinian case in fluent English, polished while studying in England and the U.S. for his doctorate. The Jerusalem-born Erekat first came to international prominence in 1991, aged 36, when he served as deputy head of the Palestinian delegation to the Madrid Conference. It was preparation for the role he is most known for, an architect for the Oslo Accords, which he worked at for years, and chief Palestinian negotiator in subsequent talks with Israel.
All of us had one objective in mind, one concern, and that's the protection of the peace process and the saving of the peace process.
But these negotiations under successive Israeli leaders reached a deadlock. Palestinians blamed Israel.
Every day we have a new expansion of land. Every day we have a new confiscation of land. Every day we have a new expansion of settlements and new fait accompli policies, which will ultimately lead to clashes.
Erekat was considered a loyalist to the late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat and played a major role at the Camp David summit in July 2000. But when the conference failed and the Palestinians launched their intifada, Erekat became an increasing vocal critic of his former negotiating partners, rarely missing an opportunity to slam Israel and its policies. When Arafat was replaced as president by Mahmoud Abbas, Erekat went from chief Palestinian negotiator to minister of negotiations. Although he resigned briefly and then returned, he remained an Abbas loyalist and was also appointed Secretary General of the PLO. As negotiations with Israel ground to a halt, Erekat largely retreated to his home in Jericho, often speaking to the press, always championing the Palestinian cause, and becoming a staunch advocate of the BDS movement against the Jewish state. Many Israelis accused him of, at best, distorting facts, at worst, outright lies. He won friends abroad, but few in Israel with his claims, such as accusing Israel of killing 500 Palestinians in the Jenin refugee camp in 2002, when the real figure was only in the dozens, or accusing Israel of executing his cousin, who actually intentionally rammed a police checkpoint. In an interview with I-24 News in October of last year, Erekat reflected upon his career and the regional failure thus far to reach a two-state solution.
People are, angry at us, not because they're against the two states, because we promised that once we recognize Israel, once we accept the two-state solution, once we accept the resolutions of the Security Council 242 and 338, once we go to negotiations, we will be independent and we will have our say. We were unable to deliver because of the various Israeli government, stopped by Mr. Netanyahu, who opted to dictation rather than negotiations.
With blame also pointed at the U.S. and a warning about the future.
This American administration of President Trump has shifted from being pro-Israel to being pro-Israel occupation. And that's a huge difference. If they don't want me to be a Palestinian in my Palestinian state, and they're not going to accept me to be an Israeli with equal rights, what do they define me?
Erekat has now passed his final years in Jericho, sadly symbolic of the increasing isolation of the Palestinians, as the Arab world turns its back on them, either for internal reasons or to pursue normalization treaties with Israel, symbolic, too, of the Palestinians' unfulfilled dream and ambitions. Emily Rose, I-24 News.